Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning from wherever you're joining us today. It's my privilege to welcome everyone to today's panel, The Power of Championing Disability Inclusion, brought to you by the Rick Hansen Foundation. My name is Matthew Shaw, and I'll be your moderator and your host for the next hour. And before we begin, I'd like to share my gratitude for the privilege of living and working in Canada and acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. I happen to be joining you today from Barrie, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which includes the Ottawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi nations, who together are known as the Three Fires Confederacy. And I also would like to acknowledge the Wendat Nation, which is also known as the Huron, who occupied my portion of Ontario prior to the middle of the 17th century. And we are, of course, all of us here gathered from across the country and perhaps even further afield. And so, in the spirit of honoring Indigenous history and culture and to recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land, I'd like to acknowledge that we are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. And we'll take a brief moment to reflect on the enduring relationship between our land and the Indigenous peoples of Canada. Well, to begin, I think I would like to wish everybody who is with us today a happy National Accessibility Week, which launched yesterday, a week to celebrate the many contributions and leadership of Canadians with disabilities from coast to coast. And every year at this time, it's a special opportunity for us all to come together to reflect on how we can become a better, more inclusive, and more accessible Canada. So, our discussion today is a personal favorite and passion of mine as we focus on the importance of prioritizing disability inclusion as an essential mechanism for promoting innovation, attracting talent, and creating workplaces where everybody has the opportunity to thrive. And this is a topic that's near and dear to me because a few years ago, after the experience of disability has shaped so much of my life, I was diagnosed with a blinding eye condition, a very rare and progressive disease that's affected both my hearing and my vision. And the onset of that condition, while acting as a professional, moving across many different industries and sectors, really brought home the ways in which that my experience of moving through the world had to change as a result of my experience. And one of the things that I was enormously grateful for was the opportunity to see inside and to work with many different organizations so that I could equip my skill set to understand how best to move through and succeed in these kinds of environments. And of course, this is not the same experience for everyone. Our workplaces are infinitely diverse. We cover many different territories, many kinds of work, and we all have many diverse roles within those organizations. And so this question of how do we move through our organizations? How do we work within our organizations to create a culture of inclusion and accessibility is so important. And I am thrilled to be here as your moderator today and to welcome our tremendous guests who together bring a wealth of experience across a number of different organizational types. And it's just a privilege and pleasure to call them friends and colleagues and to welcome them here today. So, on behalf of the Rick Hansen Foundation, I want to welcome our panelists, Josh Vandervees, John Turco, Melissa Davis, and Sumit Kumar. Thank you, all of you, for being here today and for sharing your stories and insights with us. Our conversation is intended to be an open and honest one, and so I want to encourage everyone to share your authentic experiences. And while that can be a challenge in our day-to-day lives, but this is a space where we can learn and grow together as colleagues and as friends. And so before I pass it over to the colleagues and we begin to dive into the conversation, I'd like to do a few housekeeping remarks for all of our panelists and all of our guests who are online with us today. All attendees to the session have had their mics turned off by the host to ensure that we can proceed through our conversation without interruption. If you'd like to turn on the live captions, you can use the CC button in the menu bar in your Zoom screen. And you can also use the caption setting in the Zoom app to increase the size of your captions. And if you can't locate the link and you prefer to view the captions in a separate window, if you check in the chat right now, we also have a live transcription of our event for anyone who wishes to avail themselves of doing so. And thank you to our captioning services for being with us here today. And we also have ASL interpretation on screen as well. The chat function has also been turned off so as not to distract the panelists. If you have questions, we will facilitate a Q&A at the end of the session. But in the meantime, you can submit your questions at any point using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen at any point during the presentation. And if you send a question and we don't get to it today, we will answer it via email from the Rick Hansen Foundation following this session. Today's event is also being recorded. A link to the registration, along with a recap blog, will be sent to all registrants via email next week. So stay tuned for that. And as a reminder to our panelists, we do have a live captioner with us here today, as well as our ASL interpreters. So I'd like to remind everybody, including myself, not to get too ahead of ourselves and too excited, and ensure that we speak clearly and at a pace so that we can provide our service providers to stay with us. So the next hour is action-packed, and so without further ado, let's dive into some introductions and then we'll get right to our questions. And so I'm going to begin by taking a look at my screen here. And Josh, let's start with you. If you could take a minute to introduce yourself and your role and your work and what brings you here today, that would be wonderful.
Hi, everyone. I am Josh Vandervies. I use he, him pronouns. Un très bon matin du côte ouest. I am the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging here at YVR Airport. We are located on Sea Island, which is the unceded traditional territory of Musqueam. And so today, like all days, but especially when I have a chance to be on panels like this, I'm really thinking of elders past and present who have modeled how to tackle tough systemic issues like the ones that we're going to be touching on a bit today in such a good way. So Haichka, which means thank you. I am here in my office at the airport, and quick visual description here. I really want to get credit for the way that I set up my camera shot today. So I'm in my office chair. I've got my electric wheelchair behind me. I'm wearing a white dress shirt. I'm a white guy who was born missing most of his arms and legs, brown hair, beard, clear aviator glasses, and then I really position my round table and couple chairs and the frosted glass of my office really nicely. Hopefully you'll be able to see the feet that walk past to just show off how important I am here in a very bustling environment. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Oh, thanks, Josh. That's terrific. And Melissa, let's go to you next.
Thank you, Matt. My name is Melissa Davis, and I'm the Director of Workplace and Experience for Scotiabank. So that's really an all-encompassing role. Definitely responsible for the standards related to inclusion of all kinds. And my team works closely with teams like Rick Hansen. We did 10 audits this year on our journey of education and discovery. My Pronouns are she, her. Our offices are in downtown Toronto, but I'm calling in from Halifax, Nova Scotia today, Micmac territory, as it would be. And I am Caucasian woman with blonde hair in my late 40s, attempting to appear in my early 40s, wearing gold rimmed glasses, probably a style that's working towards that early 40s mandate. And I'm wearing all gray. I think it's rain cloud gray as the weather has dictated. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, Melissa. And I couldn't agree more. It's working like a charm.
Thank
Let's go
you.
to let's go to John. John Turco. It's a pleasure to see you again and welcome you.
Likewise, thank you, Matt, and thank you, panelists. It's an honor and a privilege to be here among all of you. My name is John Turco. I am the associate manager and product owner for the loyalty products, so Triangle specifically at Canadian Tire on the partnership portfolio. It's not my day job that brings me to this panel and what brought me to Matt in the past and Rick Hansen Foundation. It is because a few years ago I founded and now currently co-chair our employee resource group called Enable. And this employee resource group was for folks with disabilities. And it was an interesting story because as we all navigate life with a physical disability, there wasn't much advocacy for inclusivity. So I recognized that there was a gap that needed support for individuals with disabilities here at Canadian Tire Corp. And as a result, we founded the group. Our purpose fosters awareness, education, belonging, and communication among those with invisible and physical disabilities. Creating this group was instinctive. See a gap, you need to fill it by inclusive by design. Even at a young age, we always knew that things needed to be inclusive. What I forgot to do was describe my background, speaking of inclusivity. I have the same background as Matt. It's the blue and white with the Rick Hansen Foundation logo in the watermark behind me. I'm currently wearing a black golf shirt with the Canadian Tire logo, the red triangle with the green leaf. I am Mediterranean skinned with black hair, black beard, and a little bit too much gray in my beard that I would like to admit. So it's a nice little salt and pepper effect. What makes it unique in my particular instance is that I have a physical disability and I'm a caregiver of someone with an invisible disability. I'm hard of hearing. I've born this way my whole life. And my sister is a person with a developmental disability. Being part of this throughout my whole age group, it was very interesting. Being the younger sibling, but not necessarily by age, but not necessarily by mind. And always having to mature up a little bit quicker than need to. Lost hospital visits, a lot of different testing, different era that we were in today. And that allowed us to grow, to understand more and have an empathetic listening voice. And because of my hard of hearing, I really needed to pay attention to others. And that was part of what makes us all unique. And I look forward to hearing everyone's story today.
Thanks so much, John. And now we'll turn to our last panelist, but by no means the least, Sumit Kumar. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. And hello, everyone. My name is Sumit. I use he and him pronouns. Again, it's a huge privilege and honor to be here with all of you. About 300 of us are on this call. As a quick visual description, I have black hair, brown skin. I grew up in India and moved to Canada about 6 years ago. I wear spectacles, some dark brown spectacles, again, a bit of beard. And I've been, like I said, I've been in Canada for about 6 years now and have worked with KPMG. That's the organization that I represent today. And in my role, again, I have a huge privilege to contribute to helping advance disability inclusion at KPMG and as well as, where we can play a role in corporate Canada. I get to play, a role as part of our team in implementing a disability inclusion action plan that KPMG introduced last year. As part of that, I've again got to work very closely with many of our colleagues at RHF. I also get to work very closely with our Chief Mental Health Officer, one of the first set in corporate Canada. So again, a huge privilege there. And yeah, I mean, that's a little bit about me, and hopefully we'll dive into things a little bit more and on what my role is. Back to you, Matt.
Thank you so much, everybody. And so once again, we're thrilled that you're here. You bring a wealth of experience and expertise, and you work across many different organizations and types as well. One thing that I have seen a lot in my travels is it's very easy to assume, regardless of the size of the organization that you're looking at, is that they are always bigger behind the front door once you're in the inside. And even if you're working in a very small organization, you realize the breadth of stakeholders and the number of people that we're working with when we talk about this culture. I feel like it's almost always more people and always larger than you think it is, right? When you're on the outside and looking in. And so as we move into our first discussion topic for the day, is really to look at the broader question of what are the biggest misconceptions about disability inclusion in the workplace, and how can they be addressed? At the end of the day, we're all in organizations, big and small. When we realize the enormity of the relationships that are around us when we're in these places, it's hard enough to start from zero, right? If we had a zero point of view about accessibility inclusion. But not only are we not starting at zero, is that the people around us and part of our culture and our customers actually might have misconceptions about the experience of disability that we have to correct before we can even convert them into champions. And so what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time hearing from each of you, what are the biggest misconceptions that you've encountered in the workplace, and how do we begin to address them? So we can take any sort of lens and flavor on this chat as you like. Let's begin with you, Sumit. And what are the biggest misconceptions that you've encountered in your professional travels, and how do you think about addressing those?
Thank you, Matt. And yeah, that's a very important question to begin with. But if I may quickly also mention, I forgot to mention in my intro that last week I was working, with some of the panelists, and we got into a meeting, and my daughter showed up right after the meeting, and she said, "What are you working on?" I said, "There's this presentation that I'll be contributing to." And she's like, can I join it? Like, she always likes to come and sit with me. So she's not here today, but she sends her wishes as well. She said, I wish I could. Anyway, so on your question, Matt, I think it's important to recognize, the misconceptions, but also to go back a little bit as to how did we get here? Why are these misconceptions there in the first place? So I think there's a few areas that I attribute the misconceptions to. One is lack of education in general. We just don't talk about it enough. So again, kudos to you and the team to have this conversation today and for us to focus on it. I think there's also this idea of historical misrepresentation of how people with disabilities have been talked about, right? I mean, if you look at media, of how they've often been portrayed as being either incapable or on the other side of the spectrum as being, superhumanly, inspiring, right? And then there's obviously the ableist systems that often contribute to a lot of misconceptions. So there's two misconceptions that I'd quickly touch on. One is this idea that people with disabilities are less productive, or that somehow they're not as capable as people without disabilities. When in essence, I think how productive you are is, I think, directly proportional to how the skills that you've obtained, the training that you've had, supports that you have available. I'll take an example. For about 10 years now that I've been working, I've never been able to work without a monitor screen. Like, if I were to just work on a laptop, I would not be as productive, right? I need a monitor screen, and my organization has historically always supported me to get one, right? So if I were not supported with that tool, I would not be as productive, right? So there is that idea, and I think you can address that to your question by educating people, especially people that are in roles such as, performance managers, storytelling of people with disabilities where they're thriving in their roles to directly tackle that. Another idea that I'll quickly mention is this idea that accommodations are this, expensive, complex idea that performance managers often hesitate to understand and explore, when in reality, many accommodations can be simple adjustments at the workplace, which can enable people to perform in their workplace. A lot of times it's just simple one-time investment that can again help them thrive in their role. So in essence, I guess what I've experienced is that many times a lot of these misconceptions are really fueled by ableistic systems or environments that perpetuate stereotypes that further sort of justify either discrimination or exclusion. One last comment that I'd make there is that about 4 months ago, KPMG conducted a survey with over 1,000 Canadians with disabilities, and we learned that almost 44% of respondents shared that they've experienced ableism in their workplace. And our organization is not, is not devoid of that. I mean, we see that in our organization as well. The same experience is also heightened for Canadians with visible disabilities. So again, experience of ableism is very high. And then again, that further is heightened by, by people who are people of color, Indigenous people, or to us LGBTQI plus people as well. So yeah, I'll turn back to you and look forward to hearing from other panelists.
Yeah, well said, Sumit. So a lot to cover there around the systems itself and the ableism, the unseen assumptions and expectations, and then the role of tools to contribute to that. Let's go to Josh. Josh, what's your point of view on some of the biggest misconceptions you've seen in your role at the airport, but elsewhere in your travels?
Well, there are many misconceptions out there, and I have many misconceptions too. I find the more I learn, the more amazed I become about things that I've gotten wrong over the years. One of the more interesting misconceptions that I've come across lately in a few of the research studies that I've been reading, it's repeating over and over again that one of the biggest barriers is that hiring managers believe that disabled candidates can't do the job. And what a stark barrier that is. What a stark misconception that is. I think we have to really seize that bull by the horns in the disability community and really lean into building disability confidence to help hiring managers, to help workplaces understand that disabled candidates can do the job. There's a lot of disabled talent out there. And when we unlock the disabled talent out there, it's a huge performance advantage. And so it's a complicated and multifaceted education and learning path to confront this misconception. Education, we've got a lot of activities here at YVR for National Accessibility Week. We've got a wonderful digital bingo for finding accessibility features around the office and the terminal, making selfie videos about what accessibility means to me. We're tuning into podcasts and articles, and a lot of my colleagues are joining in this panel as well. This is the learning path to get more disability confident. I mean, I'll end with maybe one interesting learning that I had recently. I learned that there was more confusion than I thought in the difference between barrier reduction and accommodation. And so this has really been fascinating me recently, the opportunity we have to understand the difference. So barrier reduction is when we reduce barriers, and that helps everybody. And then accommodations are when a candidate is selected and hired for their talent, but they need an accommodation to unlock their full performance. And so accommodations are individually targeted, barriers are more broad, and it's accommodations are after the fact, barriers are before the fact. And so it touches on big issues like universal design and can design ever be truly universal? Likely not. There are some good criticisms of universal design that we will always need exceptions, and those are accommodations. So what an opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great point, isn't it? I mean, even in my own travels, I've seen, even when you encounter people whose misconceptions have been cleared up or and they're active and they're engaging, you can sometimes see a kind of analysis paralysis emerge between the tension for the universal design versus the how can I best accommodate this employee uniquely and within the wider context. And you can kind of see the moment at which the kind of internal computer gets overwhelmed, right, between those two tensions. That's really interesting. Let's go to Melissa. Melissa, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about the experience of disability that you've seen in your professional travels?
Yeah, thank you, Matt, and great perspectives from Sumit and Josh already for sure. Um, what I see a lot is that inclusion only impacts a small percentage of the population. That's the idea. It's what I hear often when I raise, new standards, et cetera. There's a very reductive view on what a disability looks like. And having my role in the banking industry in particular, it requires understanding the unique needs of our employees and clients, which are a little bit different than some other industries. We have a higher than average neurodivergent population, for example. It's not uncommon in roles that require analytical and quick mental processing skills. And on a personal side, I have the privilege of being the mom to a teenager who's on the spectrum, but also is testing in the genius range for intelligence. So, which is a common link, not everyone knows exists. But navigating the world beside a person that looks and acts and exists to the outside world without a disability, however, is challenged by noise and smells and light levels and lack of clarity in phrasing and directional signage and things of that nature. I have a much better understanding how to support our employees by offering choice in where and how they work and providing spaces to decompress, et cetera. And from a client perspective, we need to support an aging population, particularly in our branches and our wealth management offices. And again, to the outside world, they might not present a visible disability per se, nor do they want to. They don't want to be seen as having a disability. Um, However, if the reception seating that we put in is too low or the chairs don't have arms, they'll just opt to not sit down in the waiting area. They won't express why, but they're afraid they won't be able to get themselves back up. Or if the area rugs are too thick, they might stumble, or the floor tile's too slippery. Every single decision we make can have a negative impact, both emotionally or physically, on the users that we might not know have any issue coming into the space. So luckily, we have really fabulous, for example, neurodivergent ERGs, particularly in our capital markets teams. So they provide education, a safe place to have these types of conversations, and most importantly, they create a feedback loop. So, they can share in that environment with their peers and their teams, and then bring that back to real estate for us to do the work that we have to do to make sure they're supported in the workplace. So for me, I think that feedback loop is paramount.
Well, that's really interesting that you mentioned that, Melissa, on the feedback loop and the ability to actually be in contact um, with the organization and with the people that you work with and that you serve as customers and keeping that active and alive. And let's bring John Turco into that conversation because, John, I know you have a really interesting role, as you mentioned. You have your quote unquote day job, but also the work that you're doing with the employee resource group and the kind of unique viewpoint that gives you into what your colleagues are thinking on the ground, but also perhaps brings you into contact with many other units around the organization and all the kind of the many microcultures that exist in an organization. So, in your travels, what do you think are some of the most persistent misconceptions that you find yourself addressing?
You articulated that so beautifully, and I want to thank all the panelists so far for their responses. It's really hard to follow. I'm glad I'm last. I think it ties in nicely as someone from the business side really trying to listen. Hey, ERGs have really good feedback. Why don't we listen to them? And they're really boots on the ground. And here I am talking from our perspective. I have two answers. So the first answer is going to be from an organizational perspective, and the other one's actually going to be from a customer perspective. So I'm going to start organizational since that's the main kind of topic. When it comes to disabilities, according to the International Disability Report, the latest one, only 70% of it is apparent. Or sorry, 70% of disabilities are non-apparent. So they're not visible to the eye to see that that person has a disability. And when you're talking about 27% of the Canadian population in the workforce that has a disability, and which is on the rise, it's going to be much higher than that in the next 10 years. That is a significant number. In corporations, when they do their feedback forms, most of them kind of range that persons with disabilities in that workforce is somewhere between 7 to 9%. So why is there a discrepancy between that 7 to 9% to the 27% of that population if employees are a reflection of the customers you're trying to sell to? And that's because of these misconceptions. There's a unconscious biasness. How many folks that you talk to that maybe be wearing glasses maybe not consider themselves having a disability because they may see it. It's so normalized into today's society that wearing glasses may not appear as a disability. But if you remove that tool, you will not have clear 20/20 vision. And I understand there's varying degrees of that for individual folks, especially considering in Canada there's 1.5 million with sight loss. So here's the other stat I want to talk about. Customers. Did you know that in North America and Europe, there is over $2.6 trillion in disposable income for persons with disabilities? That is a large, untapped market that companies are not doing a good enough job to accommodate for. We have this idealistic perspective of what the person should be and how they should act. And we've created a society around it, which is not inclusive by design, to what Sumit mentioned earlier. And it's that difficult balance of when you should do so. So I think taking that feedback from the boots on the ground, Canadian Tire earlier this year, I believe it was in March, we came out with a new strategy called the True North strategy. And the center of our compass, which is what the strategy is framed around, was customers at our core. And employees are our customers. So really understanding our employees, you're truly understanding your customers. So if the average cost for accommodation is $500 per person, and yet some may feel that they're not capable or comfortable because there's a misconception or a bias that lives in the workplace that doesn't make them comfortable enough to ask that accommodation, then maybe it should be flipped onto the organization to ask the person, how can I help you today? What do you need to be the best and best version of yourself when you come into work?
Yeah, well, that's well put. That's well put, John. And the one of the things I think about a lot comes into just what you were getting to at the end there, which is what does solutioning begin to look like? And I see a couple of different approaches in the broader community around this importance of accessibility as an organizational commitment from the top on down and to kind of fostering creating that kind of a culture that values disability inclusion. There's another side of that dynamic though that also requires you work from the bottom up, which is to how can any of us in our role begin to showcase and act out and to provide solutions that show the value proposition of disability inclusion and kind of brings that into practice so that it can, trickle upward. So I'd like to spend a couple of minutes just talking about our next discussion topic, which is sharing an example of when prioritizing accessibility in ways big or small can lead to a change in the organization and to some measurable results. And we'll spend a few minutes here before we move on to our third discussion topic on navigating in the high seas of our current environment. So prioritizing some examples of how we use accessibility for success. Josh, and what does this look like for you in your role at the airport? I think at this point in time, I think you've been with the airport for, I think, is it close to 2 years, Josh? And I mean, you come in and you're new and you're beginning to activate and trying to get on board quickly. Like, what does that look like for you at the airport?
Well, I've been here for almost 2 years now, Matt, and one of the things that really struck me is getting a glimpse into the long history of disability inclusion that came before me. And it's really incredible because part of what drew me to YVR is that as a Paralympian, when I was traveling Canada and the world for many years, YVR was always an oasis of accessibility, truly just way better than any other airport in the country. And so when I joined the team, I just got the real privilege of getting glimpses into why that is. And so one of the reasons is that uh, we have uh, just a commitment over the long term. So we're one of the first buildings to get Rick Hansen Foundation Gold certification. Coming out of that process, we went above and beyond and developed our own bespoke set of building code type regulations that we apply to ourselves and our tenants. But those are the outcomes. It's really the culture that gets my attention. And we'll get to the measurable results because we won two really exciting awards recently, and accessibility really went into them. But I just wanted to share, we've got a very exciting project coming up with biometric gates. So as biometrics become more and more common in the air travel ecosystem, we're a leader here at YVR. We're getting to a place where you're not going to have to show your passport and your boarding pass, 100 times before you get on the flight. You can just have the gate photograph your face and you're through. And so in in airports, I mean, people might have experienced these gates maybe in like Paris or Frankfurt or big airports in Europe. I know I have, and they're deliberately made narrow so that a wheelchair won't fit through. I just can't use them when I'm traveling, and I have to flag down a staff to let me through the alternate special wheelchair way. But here at YVR, we made all the gates wide enough for wheelchairs right off the bat. All the cameras are able to get faces at a variety of heights, including seated. And I learned that they weren't like that at the beginning, but our leadership immediately saw, without me even being involved, uh, wait a second, if it's not accessible, that's not an option for us. And they immediately went in and modified the deployment of these gates. I mean, that's the real glimpse into the commitment to disability inclusion and accessibility here at YVR. We recently won Best Airport in North America by Skytrax for a stunning 14th year. And our disability inclusion just really shines through in contributing to that. Condé Nast also named us the sixth most accessible airport in the world recently. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it's nice to be on top in some of these awards and nice to have some world-class results that we're going to try and get even better at.
One thing that struck me there, Josh, was is that in any of our organizations, even when, we're coming in new or we've been embedded for some time, we can lose sight of the fact that there are, especially in larger organizations, but they can be even more tricky in smaller organizations, is that there may very well be other champions around the organization or a legacy of work. However, limited to a unit or a team or a particular champion, but like the importance of finding and tapping into those and tying that into a wider story is something that really stands out to me. Sumit, do you have any insight from your, KPMG is a really interesting organization itself, and then obviously works with clients in a number of different fields. Like where are some examples that you've seen accessibility being leveraged successfully?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Happy to share a few areas, and congratulations, Josh, on all of the accomplishments. I think there's clearly a lot of work has gone into building inclusive spaces and the airport, right? So kudos
That's
to you.
my
And
colleagues, Sumit, mostly my
yeah,
colleagues.
to the team, to the team. So Matt, I mean, I think from a KPMG perspective, I think we're very much on the journey to realizing some of the benefits, so to say, or results. But I think there's a few areas that I'll quickly touch on. One of the things that we've tried to recognize working with our different people networks or ERGs is that the conversation of accessibility has to be about everyone. It's not just about people with disabilities, right? When we talk about accessibility, it affects everyone. So as an example, one of the things that we're focused on as part of our disability inclusion action plan is physical infrastructure or office accessibility, where KPMG is working with Rick Hansen Foundation, where we've conducted accessibility assessments of 6 different offices across the country, the 6 regions that we're represented in, to understand some of our gaps and work towards bridging those. One of our sites was rated accessibility certified, over time moved to being gold certified, right? So those are clear results of when you work in that direction, you understand gaps, and then when you work towards addressing gaps, you can make things better. So that is one. Second, again, going back to the principle of accessibility benefiting everyone, one of the things that many of our organizations now have are simple things like, accessible desks. They can move up and down, right? You have accessible desks benefiting everyone. If we look at our personal environment for a second, many of us watch movies, let's say Netflix, when you have subtitles, which is an accessibility feature, I think that's how it started. It benefits us all. Like I could watch a movie at night with my daughter sleeping by my side and depend on subtitles, or sometimes you don't understand a certain accent and, subtitles come handy there as well. So again, I think going back to the idea that accessibility benefits everyone, and therefore, from KPMG perspective, one of the things that we've seen is that when we anchor the conversation on that, and going back to how I was saying education can be a key area to bring about awareness, we noticed that, let's say as part of National Accessibility Week, historically as well, every time we've held a conversation focused on accessibility, we've tried to get perspectives from, let's say, people with disabilities, or a new parent who's gone around the city with a stroller, and what their experience with accessibility or the lack of it has been, so that we could help raise that awareness. And we see typically almost 4 times participation from people than we know are people with disabilities at the organization, right? So clearly it tells us again that it is really about everyone. And I think therefore when you approach it like that, I think we are able to then directly impact some of the business outcomes that any organization looks at, right? So as an example, when you have accessible environments, you could have more productive, workforce, which directly results in a business imperative of higher productivity, retention or employee engagement, right? So I think those are some direct results that you would see if you focus on accessibility. And again, like I said, we're, I think, early in our journey, but those are some of the ways that we know that our people are benefiting from it. One last point that I'd make is, with the Disability Inclusion Action Plan that we launched last year, it's a multi-year action plan, and we worked with our three people networks, our disability inclusion network, a parents network, and a neurodiversity network. And one of the first 5 key priorities that were identified by our people networks were the fact that we needed to focus on accessibility. So again, going back to the fact that I think Melissa had a great point about, the feedback loop of really just listening to your people and understanding what is it that is a priority for them. And it clearly came across as one of the key priorities that we had to focus on as an organization from an accessibility perspective.
That makes total sense. And we're getting to our final 15 minutes here, so I do want to encourage our guest today. If you have a question you'd like to answer the panel to answer live or to address in person, please send them in at your convenience here. And while people are getting their thoughts together, we must explore a contemporary topic of the moment. And this is going to be our third and final big picture discussion topic. And I'm sure our community will have questions related to this, which is all of your responses have talked about the need for accessibility to have a space to grow, to try new things, to take risks, to admit that we're on a journey. We're in a really complex and shifting social and cultural environment today where countries around the world are here in Canada on the verge of recession. We're seeing some pushback in certain jurisdictions in the world related to diversity and equity inclusion efforts. If we're in this space, how can an organization maintain its momentum even amongst all the ebbs and flows of the world that's around us and these shifting priorities? I'd like to turn it to Melissa and give you a chance to weigh in here before we turn over to our questions. How do we maintain this momentum, Melissa?
Yeah, this is a very topical question these days. Thank you, Matt. I think we have to stick together. We're doing that today. We're representing that, everyone participating in this. At Scotiabank, we have a bit of a unique group. So of course we have the teams you would anticipate, our DE&I groups, employee networks, ERGs, fabulous groups that we work together with. But we also have something unique. It's called the W4 core team. So we basically provide oversight and governance of the integrated employee experience. So the core team will review material changes to any new elements of the integrated employee experience. They'll also receive regular feedback and reporting from our employee experience data center of excellence, do pilots, things of that nature. So what is it exactly? It's led by Hillary Green, so our fabulous head of transformation and change, but it's made up of the leads from real estate, including myself, technology, operations, HR. So from an HR perspective, it includes our senior manager of DE&I, it's Kimberly Pellet, many know Kimberly, our director of culture, along with our HR business partner. So if you can imagine, if we're all together at the table having conversations together, what happens? It's like rocket fuel for solutioning. So a timely example is Kimberly recently held a working session with the results of our inclusion surveys with this team. And we all sort of in real time solutioned. And it was incredible, like something that in the past would have happened in isolation. Together, we were able to very quickly say, we've got that, I can solution that in the built environment, technology, et cetera. And then, equally as important, outside our organizations like we're doing today, sticking together with our peers. So for the banks, we have this really cool, all the big 5 banks meet regularly. So from our teams, it's the design and change leads. We meet with our counterparts and we share. We talk about challenges, opportunities, how we navigate solutioning things. And the most recent example of that was I recently reached out to ask, how can we welcome smudging in more of our campuses? Because it's a challenge with the landlords and the education. And together we have this open dialogue with our peers in the market. And then we can, again, it's that rocket fuel to push forward solutioning. So, my advice is just stick together. We're stronger together on this topic.
Thanks, Melissa. John, let's turn to you. How do we keep this momentum going across organizations when there's a lot of shifting tides and winds?
Yeah, love this question. Love that response from Melissa. Uh, Canadian Tire is in a unique situation because we have a bank component and we have our retail banners. And last year, due to the AOTA compliance, the banks had to adopt an accessibility plan. And now there's a level of compliance that you could just check it off and then you've hit everything and you're good to go. But what the team has done, so Amy Schaefer and her team has done, is said, there's more we can do. They created an advisory council. They invited the ERGs, employees, leadership, brought everyone to the table. They do annual reviews of their their reports that they're going to send out, and then they send it out. They worked with yourself and Rick Hansen on doing some auditing on some of our buildings, our CTFS buildings in Welland, in Niagara region, and making sure those are getting up to board. So those are the necessary things. So and then our leadership took that and said, we could do that too. So now, across the board, the whole organization, we have adopted and starting the implementation of an accessibility strategy, which is going to affect thousands of stores, thousands of employees, nearly 17,000 employees, corporate employees at least. And we're going to be able to have accessibility at the forefront. One of our core values, is funny enough, is stronger together. Melissa just said that. And another one is inclusive is a must. This is definitely a step in those right directions. But the question is how can we maintain the momentum? And I provided the answer, little tidbits at the time. The real answer is just one step at a time. Just have the right people in the room and just find a way to get it moving forward. Whether it's rocket fuel, or maybe it's just that little bit of oil to get the engine running. At the end of the day, if the conversation stops, out of sight, out of mind, you don't want that to happen. It needs to start forward. Which is why a lot of these large organizations, the panelist members that are here in front of you today, we're all thought leaders in making sure that this conversation continues going. So those who are listeners, do your best. Keep the conversation rolling.
Thanks, John, and Josh and Sumit. Let's turn it over to you. I want to make sure you have an opportunity for a quick comment on this here. We are getting towards the end of our webinar, but this is such an important topic, and we're all dealing with it in different ways. So why don't we begin with you, Josh? Any comments on maintaining momentum amongst shifting tides?
It's a very disorienting and intense time, as we all know. And so it's just important to look at each other and reach out to each other and recognize that and to remember that we're not alone. The quote from Michael Brooks is really helping me in these times. He's an author, and he says something to the effect of, be gentle on the people, but be ruthless on the systems. And so I think we have to do that even more now than ever. And it's easy to mix those up, to accidentally be gentle on the systems and hard on the people. And so let's not do that. Matt, if I may take 30 seconds, I can maybe answer some of the questions that I see coming in too. I see there are some good YVR ones, and they're really related to this. So first of all, I saw one there about getting in touch with customer service. So feel free to reach out to me individually, and I can help you to get your message where it needs to go. The other questions were about the ecosystem of air travel. And so this is really what draws me to the role, is our chance to improve accessibility in the ecosystem. There are many different entities, airports, airlines, government. There's CATSA, there's CBSA, that's the security or the Canada Border Agency, and we all have to work together. We all have to figure out how to prioritize accessibility. Decentralization is a real strength of the air travel industry, so that when crashes or accidents do happen, we react. And it's what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragile. We become even stronger, the system. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do we bring that into accessibility? How do we make it so that accessibility also makes the system stronger and stronger? I'm 2 years in or so. We'll see. We'll see how far we can go.
Thanks, Josh. Very good. And Sumit, I want to give you a quick chance here. I know a minute is not going to be enough, but how do you think about momentum and maintaining it?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I mean, I'll be quick. I guess the only other idea that I'd put out there is that DEI, or building momentum there, I think many of our organizations, almost all of us, can simply just ground ourselves back into our values, right? I mean, from a KPMG perspective, I think if I look at some of our values, a number of values in there speak about, when we're together, we're better, right? I think if we just ground ourselves on our principles at the organizations, why we do what we do, I think that alone will offer plenty reasons to continue the momentum.
Well said, well said. And we did get a number of amazing questions in the chat, like Josh alluded to here. And one of the things we will do as a team is we will ensure that all of our panelists who have been very gracious with their time will share these questions and will provide answers to some of the questions we've received. And of course, our panelists have also been very gracious to make themselves available if you have other questions or things you'd like to talk about and discuss. So thank you, everybody, for being online today with us, for submitting your questions and or beginning and engaging in this conversation. Because as Josh so eloquently put it, we are in a time with great change and lots of wins in the system. And a common theme is that the work still must be done and must be seen to be done, and we must do it with each other in order to keep our movement going. And so, as we wrap up today, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to everybody for joining us from wherever you are across this country and beyond, and to say thank you for your questions. We will follow up with some more material for all people who have registered to the session next week. And I want to wish all of you an incredibly happy and productive and successful National Accessibility Week. Thank everybody who's on the call today as our panelists. It's a pleasure to chat with you. And to all of you out there for all of the work that you do to make our shared world more accessible and inclusive for everyone. And so without further ado, we will wrap things up for today. We very much value your feedback. So there is a QR code on the screen. If you would be so willing to share a moment of your time to provide some thoughts and a short anonymous survey to help us continue to deliver sessions that are meaningful to you, we'd greatly appreciate it. Josh, Melissa, Sumit, John, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing of so much more great work to come. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.